we got to highlight some run development here from Mason. So, Mason, I was thinking like, how do I share this lesson, right, from the coaching call that we had? I think it was 2 weeks ago, right, on the long run and all the things to improve off the long run. And I was like, I kind of want to wait to see how he can like improve off of that and build off of that. And without a doubt, you fucking executed that to a T this weekend. So I'm gonna start with the last long run, the one that we pried into. And we'll just sort of call out what was not working so well in that one. And that will tee us up to show what went really well on the one this past weekend. So before I get into this, do you have any immediate feedback on this run? This was back from the end of October. This was the one that we just pried into together.
I'm trying to remember. I guess so this was the first time I'd ever done this workout. I guess just context behind it, and the way I was looking at it or the way I ran this is like I basically did like a warm up, whatever the warm up was, like in this one loop around my neighborhood, and then did like out and backs for the mile, just for everyone to have context around this. But yeah, we can then I'll just jump in if there's anything if you have questions or things I can clarify.
Cool. So when I'm looking at a run like this is just a great opportunity for any athlete to see like what is kind of the focus when a long run is being reviewed or a pace changing run, really, because we have two things going on here. This is a long run, but more importantly, this is an interval run. And so the first thing that stuck out to me was like we've got basically gaps in the watch. There are watch pauses between nearly every interval set. So this run is 5 by 1 mile tempo repeats. So you're getting up to zone 3 for a mile. Then you're checking down and you're doing a recovery for a quarter mile. And you go through that 5 times. And so I was seeing like, all right, well, we've got a handful of stops here. And one of the number one ways that we can just improve on how we're handling training overall, we can get better fitness development, we can just get easier mindset development is intervals should be one continuous set, right? We really want to train the body to work up to whatever the intensity is that's prescribed into the interval hard effort. And then we want to sort of flow down and be able to recover at whatever the prescribed interval is. And so that was the first thing that really stuck out to me. And then as we were prying into it a little bit more, what we realized was that you were almost going a little bit too hard for these tempo segments. This first one starts out at 7:30, 7:45. These ones are all pretty much run at 7:45. And when we checked in back on your zones, I believe off of memory that your zone 3 was really like 8:45. Is that right?
Yeah, my zone three I think is like 9:10 to 8:30 or something like that. And that was the biggest thing. Like that's why I was making these stops because I wasn't looking at it like a zone. I just saw like RPE 8 and I'm like, okay, like let's see what this feels like. And then I tried to push it. And so I would stop to like blow my nose and grab a drink of water in between every. I think that first stop was like a piss or something. But the rest
Yeah.
of them were like, stop and grab water. And so it was great. Like, I mean, we'll talk about the run from the last weekend in a second, I'm sure, but that was a huge
Yep.
difference is like trying to put those together and actually like realizing I don't have to like be all out or like look at it. It just it was a different way to look at the intervals that I hadn't really been doing before because I hadn't been paying as much attention to like the different zone paces. It was kind of like all on feel. And when I do
Right.
that, I generally go too fast for anything that isn't zone two.
Right. And I mean, this is the beauty of endurance. Is like, dude, you did your first Ironman this year, you did your first 70.3, and there's still opportunity to like make the process way better and just continue to improve through all of this. So that was a huge value and a reason why we did the zone testing, right? Is like giving you more clarity on your zones. I will say one thing on the RPE stuff. So the reason that RPE is written in there is because that, to me, at least as I understand it, is the simplest way to prescribe the effort in training peaks as it will reflect on your Garmin watch. The other way to do it is with heart rate, I believe. And what I've seen with athletes is that if their heart rate is either inaccurate on their Garmin or if maybe their heart rate is just kind of out of zone for whatever reason, the watch is kind of freaking out and giving you alarms the whole time that like you're out of zone. So it's simpler to just say RPE of 8 or whatever it is.
Yeah, and
RPE of 8 is kind of how I would describe a tempo. But there's opportunity for me to improve on how I can clarify that. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I wonder if there is chance to just prescribe it via pace because that would make it very obvious for you where you're supposed to be running. But anyway, the reflection there was like RPE 8, you just kind of went hard. And as it relates to your zones, that was like a minute per mile faster than you really should have, which then required you to need a break, right? That was kind of the whole thing going on.
yeah, and the one note on the training thing is honestly, it's like because I didn't really pay attention to what my zones were. Like if there was like like now that I have looked at the zones, I'm like, oh, this is what the RPA like should have been based on my pacing. But I was just kind of all going off feel, and I know we set the zones like God knows how far back, and then I think Training Peaks like updates them sometimes, doesn't it, based on your or do you
It
have to manually
depends on if
update?
it senses faster pacing, it can suggest to update your threshold, but
Okay, so yeah, I
they
mean, yeah, we set those like so far back that I just wasn't even looking at it when I was doing these, and that probably would have made a world of difference in my training if I was paying a lot closer attention to this. So that's it's more
right.
on like once I made that connection, the RPE like works now. When I see the RPE numbers, I know what they're like correlating to, and I can think about that better and like tie everything together.
You have a different frame on it. Beautiful. So, that was really like one part of this. The other thing I'll add in is we spoke about like, hey, if you do need to pause your watch because you got to take a piss or if you got to take a dump, like, listen, you got to do what you got to do. But that should also be used as feedback. Like, we should learn from that. And listen, if you got to take a dump mid interval set, like that should make you reflect on what did I eat before this run? When did I eat? What did I have for dinner? If you got a P mid interval set, like, did you just slam 32 ounces of water 20 minutes before walking out the door because you woke up at 6 a.m. and didn't drink anything for 2 hours? And then all of a sudden you're going out for a run and you're like, fuck, I haven't had anything to drink. Like, these are all ways to just like refine the process a little bit more. Um, the other thing I wanted to note here was the actual route that was chosen. So for you guys who are following along on the screen here, when Mason starts this thing out, he does this kind of big loop that he does for about the first 25 minutes. So at about the 25-minute mark, he sort of loops back around to where he started this. But then as these intervals were going, I mean, Mason explained that he sort of did mile out and backs. What I observe as a coach is that the guys who are doing lots of up and backs with lots of turnarounds, running in and out of cul-de-sacs, they are typically also the guys that are pausing their watch a lot and not totally executing these runs the way that we are hoping to. The guys who execute these runs well, they're typically just running out and about. Like, they just have a long route. They know a place near them that's like an open road or it's a rail trail or whatever it is, right? We want to be safe. We want to be avoiding cars. We want to avoid intersections, stoplights. Like, if we're doing intervals, again, we want this to be a continual effort. And if you are doing an out and back run, like, that's one thing. You run like, 3, 4, 5 miles out, you turn around, that's one thing. But the consistent up and back is just kind of stressful, if you ask me. And as we were looking at Mason's overall effort on long run consistency, well, what really stuck out as we were reflecting is like a bunch of these long runs were then getting missed. Like, we had 3 straight weeks where the long runs were missed. We had one week where it was really cut short, and that was all after. That was like the 4 or 5 weeks after this one specific run. So to me as a coach, I'm like seeing this run, and to me, I'm just like, this is looks super chaotic. And then all of a sudden, mentally, like as we're trying to get this stuff in every weekend, there's just like friction, right? Whereas if we are somebody who's operating with some of these finer points tuned in, we can allow the mind to just get into rhythm of like Saturday morning is my long run day, right? If that's what the structure is that you're on, you get up at 6 or 7, freaking bang this thing out in an hour and a half, you're home by 9 and you're done with your training by the day, right? That's like the dream scenario that we go to. Now, Mason, very coachable, receptive took the feedback well. Let's check in on the progress in his most recent, we'll call it pace changing long run. So this run slightly different. We got 2 by 20 minute tempo run here. And Mason's watch is Mason's watch has some things going on. So the elevation is always jacked up, and the elevation says it's about 10,000 feet of gain,
Yeah,
10,000 feet of loss. So we'll get
Garmin
that out
says
of here.
1,000. So I think need to get a new watch or get it serviced or something. Yeah, every run, no matter if it's flat, Garmin says like 120,000 feet of gain. It's hilarious.
Yeah. So is what it is. We'll clear that out of there. And right here we really just have beats per minute, RPMs, and then his pace minute per mile. So what I see here is the first, like, let's just go right through it. So first, let's look at the things that we saw in the previous run. There is one short little pause here that looks like it's during the recovery. Boom, not during the interval set. That's huge. We also see that the route, as you look at the map, his route is a long out and back. This is probably on like a river trail, it looks like, some rail trail of some sort.
Yeah, it's
So
a
better
river.
selection of route compared to like the neighborhood loops and up and backs, right?
Yeah, way better. And I realized I'm like I want to do some more stuff on gravel so I can save my legs and running on road all the time, which that was great.
Softer surface. There we go. So I don't always program this for guys just because of what they've got access to, but if we can do long stuff on softer surface, gravel or dirt roads, like that's great. So Mason does a really good job here, right? Exactly to the 10-minute mark, we've got this warm up. You can see him gradually coming into the warm up. Then we can see that he bumps up into this tempo zone, and look at the pacing. He's running at that 849, 851, like he's following his zone prescription to a T. Heart rate is at 175. That's great. It looks super steady. And then we see him come into the recovery. So then he's got what, 5-minute recovery here. Checks down to 10:15, 10:30 pacing for the recovery. Looks like a quick pause. Was that like a P or something like that, Mason?
Yeah.
Perfect. Did it in the recovery. That's fabulously executed. Then bumps back up, and he's back again running 854, 852, right? Heart rate is right back up in that low 170s. He's got 172 there. Heart rate on the recovery had dipped down to high 150s, 160-ish. So we see like a good 10, 12, 15 beat gap between the working set and the recovery set, back into the working set, and then cruises home to finish this thing out. Heart rate comes down. We can see it's even at 150 at times. Pace is down to, 10-minute miles or so. So to me, this type of development on how to execute an interval run, also a long run, like just beautiful here. Mason, what is your reflection on just how this went?
I mean, it clearly went a lot better. Like it was the the last two runs, like I almost was like the pace. Honestly, the biggest change was the focus on the zones because
Nice.
that gave me a lot better just like frame to run in because I kept thinking like my tempo should be closer to that like 8-minute pace. And so I was the last because I did this same run I think the weekend before too, and it was about and it was a lot different because I think I did it in my neighborhood still. And like I was almost like struggling. It was I guess even with that I was struggling to stay at that 9 minute, and this like going on like a longer out and back made it a lot easier to think about like staying at that tempo pace, and like setting up a route setting up a route beforehand like this made it a lot easier to execute the run. um,
Love it.
yeah.
What, real quick, what are these? So these dips here where like it looks like you stop for a second, like what are these?
um I those are me like trying to shoot snot out of my nose because every time I'm trying to run and I do it, I'm just like I start to like I'm not coordinated, man. Like I am, so I'm just stop. It's a lot easier to me to clear my nose when I like fully stop for a second, and so like maybe like uh but yeah, that's what that is.
Okay, good. So whatever, right? Still
Yeah,
some opportunity to sort of sort that out, but that's
yeah,
fine, right? Like massive progress from here. One thing, so now I want to be able to connect this to race day, right? And I want to help you guys understand like Mason's having a massive evolution in real time on executing zone training. And now, how can we think about that for a race? Well, for an experienced athlete, a 70.3, we really want that to be like a zone three kind of an effort. And listen, if your body's not there aerobically where you can sustain that, that's okay, right? We still just opportunity to develop. But what I'm hearing from you, Mason, is that your initial expectation was that you should be able to run 8 minute pace for what you would just consider as tempo. But if I had asked you if you can run 8 minute pace for a 70.3, I would assume the answer would be fuck no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it would be like I don't know if I there's like some openings this summer to possibly do a 70.3, but like the goal would be to run like this like just sub 2 hours, like sub 907 or whatever that is.
Right.
Right. Which
And
I guess
so
is my zone three. Yeah.
that's right into the zone profile. So right here in this run, like you just banged out 40 total minutes at around 8:45 pace, right? Which is super different than the effort level you're putting out when you're running the 10 minute pace, right? And you're recovering or cooling down. But it's also super different than the 8 minute pace. Like the 8 minute pace for you is up in your threshold.
Yeah.
And so as we develop fitness, right, just prescription to these zones and execution on these, I mean, this was one of the big early reasons why I wanted to do the training was that I was seeing that guys were just going too hard. And it's like, listen, we don't need to go that hard in these certain zone profiles. We can still get the stimulus and get the adaptations we can need. We can actually get them better. And we can start to develop some pacing that's actually sustainable because there's really no point to be running 8 minute pace for the first 20 minute set if you can't run it again for the next 20 minute set.
Can I add another note here too? Something I just remembered. I was listening to the symposium call, I think, when I was doing this run, and I messaged Blaine privately after, but he was talking about how like it's almost better. He was talking about something about the difference in like recovery of like walking versus just like jogging really slowly. And I thought about that a lot. Like I wanted to walk for like the first like minute or so after I finished these intervals because it was like cold as hell, and I was like, I just need a second. But I was like, okay, if I can just like jog really slowly, like it made me realize that it's not as hard as I thought it would be to maintain that like 10-minute recovery pace. And the biggest difference between this run and some of the last long runs that I've done is that I've felt like that 10-minute pace has been significantly easier to hold recently.
Recently, well, this is awesome because what I'm seeing going on is like number one, you're not having to work quite as hard as you think in the on segments, right? So that 8:45, it's not crushing your body the way that the 7:45 was in that 5x1 that we looked at. But part of endurance development is that, that easier pace, it might not just automatically get faster at like this up and to the right trajectory. It might stay the same, but just get way fucking easier. Just get way easier. You might just see your heart rate stabilize more at it, right? You might see your heart rate actually start to drop, right? We might see from you in a couple of months of development that like we're able to see, consistent 140s running, right? You're in 150s here, which is fine, right? We're in 140s in the beginning, starts out 130 and does a good job through the first couple of minutes of sitting there in the 145 range, but then it gets up into the 150s, right? So that to me would be like how I'd orient you to think about this type of stuff moving forward is like, how can I keep recovering really well in that 10-minute pace and make that thing feel fucking easy?
Yeah. And I think about what you said about just like preparing for race day, and I've seen so many people talking about it of like running like hot summer miles or like running cold miles. Like once I get to the race day when it's going to be, I guess my half marathon's in May, so it might still be hot, but it's going to be a hell of a lot more advantageous running environment than what I'm running in here. And so like that built the compounding of just the training and the better environment, like my heart rate will end up being lower and it'll be easier to sustain some of those paces is what
Right.
I'm imagining.
Right. And just with more execution on runs like this, you will also get more feedback of like, well, was my heart rate higher this week at the same pace? Well, was I dehydrated? Did I have a fuck ton of caffeine? Was it really windy? Like all these different elements that um, that impact heart rate, you'll just organically start to be a little bit more aware of, rather than just think like my heart rate's too high and it just should be lower. All right, cool. Well, thanks for letting me pry into that, Mason. This is just such a great example. So I'm going to probably clip that and just share that with the group. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to get into was, maybe I'll check into